Okay, I'm going to start. Let others join. So, in the previous class, we were discussing about the structures of the receiver in our DC class. We were discussing mainly about the correlated receivers. So, what are these correlated receivers? These are the receiving filters which are meant to help us in identifying the pre-detection point. It is going to help us in obtaining the pre-detection point, that is Z of t, which is obtained by integrating over a period of 0 to t, that is one symbol duration. What we are going to integrate? The product of the received signal with respect to the reference signal. So the reference signal can be the symbol themselves, or the reference could also be what are known as basis functions. So depending on whichever is the, let me name it like this, Zi, this is Zi, you can also name it with something, so we can signify it like this. So depending on whichever the correlator or whichever the reference signal that we are making use of, depending on that we can write the correlator receiver expression. In the first case, we saw the scenario where in order to compare the received signal R of t with all the symbols which are generated on the modulation, on the modulated symbols, we need to compare it with each and every symbol starting from S1 to Sm. So how to do that? We are going to make use of reference signals, because we know that for a given modulator there will be a corresponding receiver or a demodulator. So if I am generating on the transmitter side, if I am generating 32 symbols, then I must make sure that my receiver is also designed to receive 32 symbols. That is most important. So I know the m value which is constant on either transmitter and the receiver. So therefore what I am going to do, since I would be knowing the information about what are all the possible amplitudes of my received symbols, I can still compare the received signal with each and every signal amplitude or each and every signal. So by doing so, I am comparing the incoming received signal with m reference signals. With m number of reference signals, thereby this requires m number of correlators. Number of m correlators are required. So which is a very huge number. M, when we go and choose for a higher and higher values of symbols, then we are going to obtain a very huge circuitry which should be doing the correlation operation, that is integrator. Mixer combined with an integrator is called as a correlator. So we may require m number of different correlators as and when the number of symbols increases. So in order to overcome this scenario, what we will be doing is we are going to reduce the number of correlators used to compare and try to do the detection process. So how we are going to reduce is, in place of reference signals, instead of using the symbol themselves, we are going to make use of the reference signals called as basis function. So we have seen that in the beginning of the classes itself, each and every symbol Si can be represented using an n-dimensional orthogonal vector space. So those orthogonal vector space, each and every axis in the orthogonal vector space are recognized by what are called as basis function, which are orthogonal to each other, and therefore every symbol Si of t in the given modulation technique, I can express it as linear combination of these basis functions, and therefore this plays a very significant role in reducing the amount of complexity involved in our design of receivers. So effectively, I can reduce the number of correlators to just n, where n is a very very small number, or n might be less than or equal to sometimes equal to m. Only when m is equal to 2, this n might be equal to 2. Okay, n might be equal to 2. So it's a very rare case. Most of the time, the n will always be far lesser than m. If you go with higher modulation technique, n will always be lesser than m. Okay, so this much having said, so we will go to a specific case where we are going to consider the transmission of two symbols only, that is S1 and S2. In that case, the correlator receiver can be reduced to only one single correlator by the R of t I will be considering. Instead of giving S1 and S2 separately, what I will be doing, if I am giving the signal for reference, I am going to give the subtracted version of S1 minus S2 as the reference signal. Instead of giving the actual signal itself, I am going to give the difference signal. So this is going to help me in finding the Z of t after passing through an integrator. Whatever I am going to get is directly the Z of t, which is equal to ai, whichever the symbol that I am obtaining, Zi is equal to ai plus a naught of t. Now, how do I conclude that this particular pre-detection point belongs to S1 or S2? I am going to compare it with the threshold. I am going to compare it with the threshold called gamma naught. If this Z1 is lesser than this gamma naught, then I am going to decide in favor of H2. If Z1 is greater than gamma naught, then I am going to decide in favor of H1. Assume that these two are PSK symbols and S1 corresponds to the symbol with an amplitude A1 and S2 corresponds to the symbol with an amplitude A2. In that case, so it happens to be like this. So how do we do this is, this method is called as identification of this threshold and all this process. The structure itself is called as, we normally tend to name it as the correlator receiver, which is of the type what will be known as the correlator receivers. We have already seen this is a specific type of correlators for this particular case especially. We call this as maximum likelihood detector. So what we are trying to do is, we are going to look at this Z of t and say whether this Z of t is greater than some threshold, then decide S1, decide it as S1. If Z of t is less than the threshold, then decide it as S2. So depending on the probability of its occurrence, either I can do it like this, or I am comparing, after obtaining this Z, I can compare also. I can compare this also. This is using a single correlator. You can do it with two correlators also. That is giving each one of these symbols as a reference symbol separately. That also you can do. Once we have done that, the next stage of binary detection is, we are going to set the threshold. So what we are going to discuss now is binary detection or decision threshold. Binary decision threshold. So what is my assumption now is, I am going to send symbol S1 and S2 over a channel, and this S1 has an amplitude A1 and this S2 has an amplitude A2. Assume that this S1 and S2 are equally likely. Which means they have equal probability of occurrence. So therefore they are called as equally likely scenarios. And assume that these two are BPSK symbols, that is binary PSK symbols. Okay, so this is the given scenario for us. What will happen here is, whenever I try to obtain like this, in the pre-detection point, I am going to plot the probability of occurrence of this Z of t. How I am going to plot this is, I hope you can see now. So what we are going to do is that, we are going to plot a probabilistic curve, given that, assume that I have sent, S1 is sent. Now I am trying to collect, I am trying to receive at the receiver side, and now I am trying to plot what are all the probable amplitudes of the received signal that I am going to get. When I plot so, I am going to get one bell-shaped curve. Okay, I am going to get a sort of a bell-shaped curve which is centered around some value, and that value happens to be its mean value. Why this happens is, why this bell-shaped curve is, whenever I am sending any signal Si of t within the zero mean Gaussian noise channel, that is additive white Gaussian noise, it will have zero mean. So once I send an information a deterministic information into a random channel which is of the type Gaussian nature, since the correlator operation or the channel operation is a linear operation that takes place on the signal which do not has any distributiveness in nature will start to acquire the characteristics of the AWGN itself. When you superimpose one upon the other, one has no characteristics, it is very deterministic, but this is going to take the characteristics of the channel itself, which is the AWGN. Therefore, the received signal will also be in the shape of a bell-shaped curve. Then next, assume that S2 is sent. Now S2 is sent over the channel. Now I am trying to plot the possible amplitudes that I am going to receive at my receiver. So if I do so, I am going to get another bell-shaped curve, which is now centered around another value which is called as A2, which happens to be the amplitude of symbol S2. So like this, once we obtain these are called as likelihood functions. The rightmost bell-shaped curve is likelihood of S1 and the leftmost is likelihood of S2. Likelihood of S2. Now I need to determine what is the threshold. To determine the threshold, you need to remember one thing, that what is this information that they are equally likely. This is more important. If they are not equally likely, then you will have to be, in setting up the threshold, you will have to be little bit biased. If suppose I am sending more of symbol S2, then I am fixing exactly at S1, means if I am fixing exactly in the midway between A2 and A1, assume that the source is little bit biased to symbol S2 itself. The probability of occurrence of S2 is more than the probability, like let's say 90% I am going to obtain S2 only 10% I am going to observe transmission of symbol S1. Then I may have to decide in favor of, I may have to fix up the decision threshold somewhere over here. I need to always decide in favor of, I need to fix it somewhere over on this side. So whatever that I am going to decide will be in favor of A2 only, not in terms of A1, because I know its probability of occurrence is minimal. So the information that the two symbol occurrence are equally likely is a very, very important thing. Now that we have said that they are equally likely, considering they are the BPSK symbols, BPSK symbols means one will have positive voltage, or which is root E, the other will have negative voltage because of it is 180 degree out of phase, so therefore its amplitude will be minus E. So one will be plus E, the other one will be minus E. So the decision threshold happens to be exactly in the midway between the two amplitudes. And how this is the decision rule. This is the decision rule. How to decide this threshold gamma naught is, in the equally likely case, when there are only two symbols, it is simply given by A1 plus A2 divided by 2. I am going to write it at the top, maybe this is not visible. A1 plus A2 divided by 2. So this is the decision making or decision threshold when we have two symbols only during the transmission, and assuming that they are BPSK symbols, we can fix up the decision threshold like this. Even in case of ASK, you can do the similar operation. And the likelihood functions are normally given by P of Z given S1. Z given S1 means S1 is actually sent. And if you are going to plot for the random variable called Z, then you are going to obtain 1 over sigma naught into under the root 2 pi exponential minus half into Z minus, it is centered around, this bell-shaped curve is centered around A1, so it is Z minus A1 divided by sigma naught whole square. So this is the likelihood function. If you write similarly the likelihood function for the leftmost case, it is P of Z given S2, the P is not visible, so let me rewrite. P of Z given S2 is equal to 1 over sigma naught under the root 2 pi exponential minus 1 by 2 into z minus, now it is centered around A2, which is z minus A2 divided by sigma naught whole square, where sigma naught square is called as noise variance. Please remember this. This is the variance of the noise. It is not the variance of the signal. The variance is coming due to the channel noise or the AWGN noise. So this is noise variance. And A1 and A2 are the means of the likelihood functions, P of z given S1 and P of z given S2 respectively. So this much you need to remember regarding the binary decision threshold. So if you have any doubts so far, you can ask. Any doubts? No doubts. Only Prithvish is answering. Yes.
Not understand what it is, ma'am.
Pardon me, wait.
The equations are now.
Yeah, ask me, Prithvish. Prithvish? Just a minute. Yeah, tell me now. Tell me, Prithvish, tell me. Your voice is breaking, Prithvish.
They just will ask this.
Okay. Tejas, you were asking something. Tejas?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you were asking something.
No, ma'am, I didn't ask anything.
No, I think Prithvish was asking, but his voice is breaking, so he said you will ask.
No, ma'am.
Prithvish, you ask. I'm able to hear you. Hey, your voice is breaking. Your voice is breaking, Prithvish. Prithvish,
no, ma'am, continue, ma'am.
Okay, fine. If you have doubts, you can ask later. Okay? Yeah. Okay, I'll continue.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
So this is it with binary decision, how to make, in case of only two symbols, how to make a decision threshold. This we have seen so far. Now we are going to look at the specific modulation technique and specific method of detection that we are going to discuss now is coherent detection of PSK symbols. Here also we are going to start off with the two symbol information, because the easiest to analyze is the two symbol one. Later on we will go with M array technique, that is M with a value greater than 2. So today we will be only discussing about the two symbol PSK detection, and that too it is a coherent detection. So the next topic that we will be dealing here is the coherent detection of PSK, especially DPSK. So I am just writing it as PSK. Especially we are going to discuss about the two symboled PSK, which is called as binary PSK. So whatever the correlator that I wrote in the beginning of this class, where R of t will be compared with respect to the combination of S1 minus S2, and this is going to get correlated or integrated over a one symbol period. Then whatever the Z that we are going to obtain, it is compared against a threshold. So here the case is very simple. Why? Because the Z that we are going to obtain, either it will be 0 or it will be assigned to, there are three possible cases here, to be very frank. That is, Z of t can be equal to the amplitude of S1, which is under the root E. The another case is Z of t could be equal to minus root E, or Z of t could be exactly equal to 0. So in the first case there is no ambiguity, I am going to decide in favor of S1. In the second case I don't have any ambiguity, again I am going to decide in favor of S2. But when it is coming to Z is equal to 0, then there is arbitrary choice of making making the decision whether it is symbol S1 or S2. So in that case we will have to be little bit whatever the receiver that it is going to decide, it will be arbitrary in nature. We cannot predict that. So if there are any errors that are happening over there, we need to take care of that, so that the mapping should happen precisely, and such a receiver, such a correlator structure which is going to compare with two symbols, we call such a detector as maximum likelihood. So what we are trying to do is we are going to compare the Z with respect to the threshold. Therefore, this is called as maximum likelihood. So we are checking what is the probability or what is the likelihood that the received structure or the received detection point Z of t is belonging to symbol S1 or S2. So this is decided by maximum likelihood detector. Now I am going to write consider. So I am going to particularly talk about the coherent detection of PSK. Consider we have BPSK symbols, and I name those symbols. Normally we are going to name those symbols as S1, S2, so on. Consider the two BPSK symbols S1 and S2. So we know that the PSK symbols are the ones where the carrier phase is changed according to the symbol that I am transmitting. So how many symbols do we have now? We have only two symbols. So 0 to 360 is divided into two equal halves with two different phases, starting with 0 phase, 180 degree phase. This depends on, of course, what is the initial phase of my carrier. If the initial phase of the carrier is 0 degree, then the next phase that I am going to use for the symbol is 180 degree. Let's suppose the initial phase itself is 30 degree, means you are going to see the line somewhat like this. So this will be 30 degree and this one will be 180 degree plus 30, which is equal to 210 degree. Like this. So depending on the requirement of this PSK, binary PSK, is that the symbols should be 180 degree phase apart. Okay, so that is the basic requirement. So in general, I can represent or I can write the equation of the symbols of the PSK as something like this. So I am going to write the two symbols. The first symbol S1 can be written as, here in this case the amplitude is constant, so it is under the root 2e by t cos of omega naught, the carrier of particular frequency called omega naught, plus the initial phase of the carrier called phi. And this symbol is sent over the symbol period 0 less than t less than or equal to capital T. So it is sent within one symbol duration, that is 0 less than or
You are
equal
not
to t.
audible.
Now, others?
Audible.
Other than Enjare, anybody is not able to listen?
Ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Ma'am.
I'll continue. So S1 is normally represented for one symbol duration, and for one symbol duration the starting phase of the carrier is considered to be as phi. So similarly, now I can write this symbol S2, where it will now have the same amplitude under the root 2e by t, the cos carrier signal with the same frequency, and the initial phase will also be same, but this will be 180 degree apart. So therefore the phase of 180 degree gets added, and this is also going to be sent over a one symbol duration. But we can further reduce it, because cos of theta plus pi will be equal to minus cos theta. So I can write this as minus under the root 2e by t into cos omega naught t plus phi. So this will be sent across the channel within one symbol duration. That is, the symbol with the amplitude, negative amplitude, will be sent over the channel for the transmission of a second BPSK symbol. So now when I send this S1 and S2 across the channel, the noise N naught of t gets added. So here we are assuming this noise that is getting added as 0 mean 0 mean white Gaussian noise. Whether I mention additive or not, it is obviously it is additive in nature. So whatever the noise that is getting added, it's a zero mean Gaussian random process. So n is detected said as a random variable, and the process that happens is the random process. It's a Gaussian random process. So for simplicity's sake, when we are going to deal with coherent detection means what? As I told you in the beginning itself, there will be two types of receiver structures. One will be coherent detection, the other one will be non-coherent detection. In coherent detection, we normally make use of the initial phase of the carrier will be considered while detecting the symbols. Whenever it is non-coherent, then we are going to not going to consider the phase of the carrier at the receiver side. So having said that, so here we will, for simplicity's sake, for the analysis purpose, once we have known through what channel we are sending, we are going to assume that the initial phase of the carrier is actually equal to 0. Now let us assume that whatever the symbol that I am transmitting is transmitted across S1 will be under the root 2e by t into cos omega naught plus omega naught. I am going to consider phi as equal to 0. That is, initial phase of the carrier is equal to 0 degree. This is for simplicity's sake that we are doing. Therefore, S2, the symbol S2 can be written as minus under the root 2e by t into cos omega naught t. Now if you compare these two signals or the symbols, you can identify the basis function. Of course, let me write the important definitions or the expansions for the terms involved in this equations. These two things are sent over one symbol period, and E is called as energy per symbol. Energy per symbol, or in other words, it is also called as bit energy. If I write it as EB, then it is called as bit energy, but you just remember E is energy per symbol and T is the symbol duration. This is the symbol duration. So what is the process that we have followed so far? Once we have obtained an R of t, which is the combination of S1t plus N of t, and there is another possibility that R of t will be consisting of S2 of t plus N of t. These are the two possibilities that we are going to receive the signals at the receiver side. What is the process here that we are going to do is, we are going to do the correlator receiver, that is maximum likelihood. What we will be doing is, we are going to find out the expected value. What do you mean by expected value? Yes, what do you mean by expectation or expected value?
Mean of that function, ma'am. Mean of that function.
Exactly, correct.
Yes,
So mean of that particular
S2
function is called as an expected value. So what we are going to do is, we are going to find out the expected value of the Z. I am going to find out the expected value of the Z, which is so obtained after finding out the correlator, given that S1 was transmitted. How to do that? Here we need to find out what is the expected value of, over a duration of 0 to t, R of t will be, how many basis functions are there here? First I have not discussed about that. How many basis functions are there here? Please respond. How many basis functions are there? Hello? One of you please respond. Pavan? Any doubts so far? No doubt. Then you should be able to tell. Correlator means I am going to compare the R of t. In order to reduce the number of correlators, we are going to make use of basis function. So here in this case, the number of basis functions that are involved is only one, which is under the root 2 by t cos omega naught t. Why we are considering the amplitude of 2 by t is, this basis function is happened to be the orthonormal basis function. Please remember this. In order to make it an orthonormal, what do you mean by orthonormal? I had given one identity of Ronneker's delta function, right? Or that is the condition for the orthogonality of the two basis functions. In that case, when kj is equal to 1, we call such a basis function as orthonormal basis function. So therefore, I am considering one such orthonormal basis function with amplitude under the root 2 by t. So whatever the energy that I am assigning, it is only for his symbol or the bit that I am transmitting. I am not associating the basis function with any energy. It is existing. When I give energy to the bit, it will combine with the basis function and it gets transmitted across. So that you must remember. So I am going to compare this R of t with xi1 of t. Okay. So here there are two possibilities. Since there is single basis function, given that S1 was transmitted, I am going to compare it with, assume that S1 was transmitted. In that case, R of t will involve S1 of t plus N of t. I am going to multiply this term with xi1 of t, of course here dt is there, dt. I need to do this process. I hope you can see now. Yes, how to do this process? Let us try to find out what is the expected value here. So 0 to t, s of t I can write this as under the root. Let me write these functions here. Please make a note of this here. In this case, I can express the s1 and s2 in terms of basis function xi1 of t, which is equal to under the root 2 by t cos omega naught t. I can write this in term s1 and s2 in terms of xi1. Therefore, s1 will be equal to a11 into xi1 of t and s2 is equal to a21 into xi1 of t. So in this case, what are a11 and a21 are? a11, this implies a11 is equal to under the root e and a21 is equal to minus root e. Please remember this much, because I know that xi1 is orthonormal basis function and its amplitude is under the root 2 by t. So having said that, see here, s1 will be under the root e into xi1 of t plus n of t into xi1 of t dt. Of course, I have not written t over here. If I have not written t, you please write. So, if you expand this, check out what will happen. This is 0 to t under the root e xi1 square t dt plus under the root 0 to t n of t xi1 of t dt. If you take the expected value, the second term will vanish. If you take this term will vanish because the cos which when multiplied by over one symbol period should always yield 0 because it will have equal number of cycles. So therefore, you will exactly end up, since initial phase is also equal to 0, you will have equal number of cycles. Like let's say, if you take one cycle, if you are going to integrate one cycle of cos over one period, then it is going to go to 0. Similarly, as in how many ever number of cycles are present in cos, if you are going to integrate it over the symbol period, then you are going to end up in a 0. So expected value for this case will happen to be under the root e. What is this? For this particular case, when S1 was transmitted, the expected value that the Z belongs to S1 is under the root E. If at all the expected value. Similarly, if I am going to do the process for to find out the expected value of Z given S2 was transmitted, then I am going to do the same correlation process, that is expectation of integration from 0 to t r of t into xi1 of t dt. But now r of t will consist of the symbol S2. So therefore it is S2 of t plus n of t multiplied with the basis function xi1 of t dt. So once we do this, if you do the same expansion like before, you are going to get the expected value as minus root e. Because S2 is clearly, let me write that step also. This is 0 to t. This one will have minus e xi1 of t plus n of t into xi1 of t dt. Okay. So by doing so, you are going to get the expected value as minus root e. So now, once you have got the expected values, it will be easier for you to now decide what will be the mean. If you are going to find out the expected value, now it is easier to find out where actually my R belongs to which decision region. So I wrote the bell-shaped curve. The region 1 will be belonging to like this. This is Z of t. There will be threshold. This is region 1 and this is region 2. So I can conclude clearly that whatever the symbol Z of t, or if the expected value of Z given S2 or Z given S1, if I obtain a value of this, if this value is greater than the threshold gamma naught, or if it is a positive value, or if expected value of Z given Si, if it is greater than 0, then I decide in favor of S1. Decide it as S1. If expected value of Z given Si is less than 0, that is otherwise, in another case, I decide in favor of S2. So you here, with properly knowing the phase of the carrier, you can do this process. Of course, what is that I have done here is, I have assumed the initial phase of the carrier as equal to 0, that is basis function. And I am also assuming that the received signal is also arriving at the same phase. That is very important. If it is not so, then I have to consider the phase information also. But here the assumption is that I precisely know what is the phase of my received signal at the receiver. So having said this much, this is the method, or whatever that we have studied so far is the coherent detection of the symbols. Whatever that we have dealt with the concept so far is the coherent detection of these symbols. So I hope so far you have understood what and all things that we have discussed. So I am going to stop it over here. This is an analog method. To be very specific, this is an analog method. Why? We are going to take the basis function, we are going to multiply with the received signal, and then we are trying to integrate it over one symbol period. So therefore this is an analog process. But you might ask, ma'am, we are doing digital. Ma'am, we are doing some digital demodulation, digital modulation. Then why the detection process we are making use of some analog circuitry like integrator and linear circuits like integrator and multiplier? Then designing that those analog devices are not very easy again. Why? You might have studied about RFICs in your LMRF subject. You might have come across 1 dB compression point, what we call it as amplifiers, power amplifiers, so all these things, and mixers basically. So all those RF circuits are not very easier to design. So we are supposed to make use of some circuitry where I can easily implement this. So the next takeover topic from this particular discussion is, all these processes that are happening here are analog in nature. So in the next class we are going to look at how to realize this correlator receiver, or this process of identifying the symbols precisely by making use of digital circuitry. So you are now studying digital signal processing. So from next few units, in the 2 more units, you will start listening to processors which does filtering, or how to realize a filter using the digital coefficients. So all these things that you are going to realize and study also in both in lab and then in theory. You are going to design and then you are going to realize them. So similarly, here also we can make use of some digital circuitry to achieve this process. So that is what we are going to see in the next class. So I'm going to stop it and conclude with this topic. If you have any doubts, now you can ask. If you are unable to talk, or if there is any difficulty with the network, you can just put it on the chat box. I'm going to respond to it. So I'll give you
And if you have
another
notes,
2-3 minutes. Please ask.
Ma'am, if you have notes, please send, ma'am.
Notes, you refer textbook,
Yes,
man. You refer textbook. Notes I have written, but it is only for my reference. It is not. It is not for students. I mean, I have not written that neatly. So I feel that you better study from the textbook. I am going to send and post the page numbers. So today, just remind me, I am going to post the page numbers. You can just make use of them, and then you can follow through the textbook. Textbook is very precise and it is not very lengthy also. Whatever that I am going to section that I am going to mention from the textbook, if you study that much, it is very well and good, because you must learn to start reading from your textbooks, because notes will not give you every information. Okay, so notes is a very concise form of information. Sometimes it will not have all the information that are required. So what I suggest is you go to the source of the information, which is the textbook. So that is my preference. Therefore, I am not giving you any notes. I suggest you people start studying
Ma'am,
from the textbook. Yes.
Ma'am, which book?
Sclad, I have put the soft copy on your Moodle platform.
Yes, ma'am.
The textbook name is Digital Fundamentals by
So that we
Sclad, and I'll just show you the cover page. I don't know whether the cover page is there or not. It is Bernard Sclad. I'm just going to type it on the screen. You can check it out. It is by Digital Communication by Bernard Sclad. That is the textbook that we are using. You can continue by referring that. It is a very good, neat textbook, and it is not something like it will be explained in a very detailed way that you may not understand. You may have to reduce it later, and there is nothing like that. It is a very concise textbook, and it is student friendly. That I can guarantee you. You will not feel difficulty in studying from the textbook. Okay, so you can make use of that. I'm just going to share the screen, and you can see. I hope you can see this. So the textbook part that we will be making use of is digital communication. Digital communication by Bernard Sclad. Okay, digital communication by Bernard Sclad. So I have uploaded this textbook in Moodle long back. You can go and check it out. Okay. Under the textbook folder, you can see 4 different textbooks are uploaded. Now you can go and check it over there. You can see this textbook. Okay. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to share this video today. You can check it out in the YouTube. Okay. I'm going to share you the YouTube link. Thank you all.